It's here. I didn't think I'd ever order this, but it's here. All right, I said I'd never order this. And then I got doing more video and I thought, what the heck? I've always had a Mac Pro. The box is a little beat up, so I'm a little worried. But now I got to get this thing in the basement. So I might have to call a son-in-law. It's not as heavy as you think it's going to be. All right, so we'll get this going downstairs. I'm going to go ahead and have lunch first. Okay, well, I got it down here. I think I'm going to open the box and lift it up on the table. Wow. So it's pretty cool in person. This cheese grater look is actually it's really three-dimensional. It's way bigger more than I thought. Well, just for the heck of it, let's, everybody else does this, so let's just do this. Turn it, and I just pull it up. And up we come. And there it is. Pretty cool. So I've got a Vega Pro 56 graphics card. This came with a stock one. I think it's just the 580. So I'm going to see if I can't put this graphics card in there as well. We'll do that later. Looks like I've got a... Hey, I'm back. I got my new Mac Pro unboxed a couple of days ago, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've run my series of 6 tests that I've run on quite a few other computers, and haven't really figured out the results yet, other than the one-to-one previews took only 5 minutes, which is half what my 16-inch MacBook Pro took. But I'm curious because I have this Vega 56 graphics card that I had in my eGPU, and I thought, it's just sitting here, and I really don't think I can sell it that easily. I thought, well, I might as well put it in. So I'm going to do a quick install. There's probably a bunch of others out there. I don't know. I don't really look for that kind of stuff. And if you want to skip it, go to the next section where I actually show the results of the test. Go right ahead. Anyway, it's pretty cool. As all the other videos show you, you turn the handle and that actually pulls it loose. You pull it straight up. And it's got to be pretty straight. All right. And we're going to lay it down on its side over here so I can get to where the card goes. The card's going to go right into, I believe, these 2 slots here. It only takes one of the, it only needs to go in this one, but it covers 2 slots, so it'll go in here like this. And I need this set of cables that you buy from Belkin. You buy them through Apple. This gives you about every possible cable you'd need to hook up a PCI card. And I believe for this Radeon, there's 2 6-pin plugs down in here. I need to get a little more light in there. Let's see if we can light this up a little bit better. There we go. Well, so these are like two 6-pin mini plugs, and these are two 8-pin plugs. Let's see, 6-pin to 6-pin, 8-pin to 6 plus 2-pin. There's a whole bunch of those. There's like 4 of these 8-pin to 6 plus 2 pins. So I assume that's what we need. All right. Yep, that looks like it right there. So I need to put one of these in this slot right here. There's our cables, snap into place. Then we need to unlock this here. I need to take out this little thing here. See if my screwdriver will work right there. That's a little hard to turn. There we go. Yeah, that one there, I don't know how you're supposed to get in there with your thumb once you got a card in there. All right, so that's out of the way. We're unlocked. And this is going to go down like this. So we've got to take out these 2 ports here. No problem, easy to do. And I believe we just now need to just drop this baby down into that slot back there. Lock it down. Lock that down. Put this back on, which goes right there and there. Pretty easy. Some of the features of this, you got to spring loaded. Okay, there we go. I mean, this interior design is actually pretty impressive. No screws to drop or get loose. This lock here is really cool, how you lock that. Now we just need to drop our cards in here, and this has to go like this. Let's put this one in first. It has to go like this. Okay, so one problem I can see is these are sticking out too far. So let's see if we can bend these down a little bit. So that, yeah, there we go. And I think that's it. We're ready to put the case back on and fire it up. All right, well, I got it installed. I will get it hooked up. I'll be back in a few minutes. Well, here I am. I've got my new Mac Pro all set up back there. It's been a lot of fun working with it. My new graphics card is in. I really can't tell. The one thing about graphics card and photographers, it's really hard to tell how much they help. I've had some interesting results from the tests, and I've actually been a little surprised at how good the 12-core Mac Pro does with several of my Lightroom tests, and how poorly it does with a couple of the others. And we'll talk about the reasons why, and why I think there's really some problems with Adobe software, and I don't know why they're not addressing them more aggressively. I guess they're too comfortable and they're too worried about other things like Lightroom on the cloud and all that stuff. But anyway, let's just jump right into the tests here, and we'll take a good look at what I did and what the results are. Now remember, this is a test that I've run on about 8 machines now, and I've got other videos, and I'll have them linked in the description below. I've tested everything from a 2015 MacBook Pro to a 2013 Mac Pro, and total of 5 or 6 Mac Pro Book Pro models altogether. So now we're going to look at a 12-core machine. This is the first time we've had that many cores to test, and we're going to pit it up against my 16-inch MacBook Pro, which has 8 cores, and we'll just see how it does. So let's go take a look. So let me run through the hardware really quick. I did actually include my 2019 MacBook Pro in the test as well. It had the 2.3 gigahertz 8-core i9, 32 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz RAM, the Pro Vega 20 GPU with 4 gigabytes of RAM and a 2 terabyte SSD. The 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro had the same processor with 64 gigabytes of 2667 megahertz DDR4 RAM, so the RAM was a little faster. Also had the Radeon Pro 5500M graphics card with 8 gigabytes of memory, so a little better graphics card, and a 4 terabyte SSD. My new Mac Pro came with the 3.3 gigahertz 12-core Intel Xeon processor. It has 96 gigabytes of 2933 megahertz DDR4 RAM, so again, a little faster than the other two. Had the AMD Radeon Pro 580X card with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I also put in my Radeon RX Vega 56 graphics card with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it only had a 1 terabyte SSD because I'm not really planning on using that SSD. Quickly go through the setup. Each machine was tested before I did much else on it when they were new, so the tests were pretty even on that. I recorded the times by shooting 4K video of what was going on, so I was able to accurately pinpoint the exact start and end of each test within a second or two. And I used a 4K camera so I could also see what was going on. I had Intel Power Gadget activity monitor and on the MacBook Pro Max fan control all running and visible so I could actually watch what was going on with the CPU speed, core utilization, GPU, and actually watch the temperatures as well. The 16-inch MacBook Pro as well as the 2019 MacBook Pro are running Catalina 10.15.2, Lightroom Classic 9.1, and Photoshop 2020 version 21.0.2. The Mac Pro was using a little bit newer software because it was updated since I tested the other ones. Catalina 10.15.3, Lightroom 9.2, and Photoshop 2020 21.1. Now, on Lightroom and Photoshop, neither of them spoke about improvements in performance on the things that I tested. There were some mentions of other performance things, and I haven't tested to see if they really were true or not. But on my current tests, which I kind of standardized on, I haven't seen any change. And of course, as soon as I see that, I'll go back to the 16-inch MacBook Pro and I'll have a real direct comparison to see if it really does improve anything. So in the very first test, we basically imported 500 Sony A7 R4 61 megapixel files. The previews are set to sidecar and embedded because that's really the fastest way to get them off the card into your computer. That's basically the same as just dragging them over from the Finder or the Explorer. And the files are on an external Thunderbolt 3 drive, so it's a really fast drive. I don't think you'll see the same speeds coming from an SD card. Really, the time on this is going to be limited by the speed of your card because, as you'll see in a minute, most of what's going on here is system level and not related to Lightroom. As far as the tests were concerned, the Mac Pro is actually slightly slower. Puzzled me a little bit, and I haven't really figured out why. 10 seconds isn't really a big deal. I don't know if I had something set wrong. If we go back and take a look at the test, I'll just kind of show you what's going on. Let me just show you the test really quick against the 16-inch MacBook Pro. So these are the tests that are running, and as I scroll through the test, you'll see that both machines are using cores very similarly. Neither are using the virtual cores very much. And especially on the 2019 Mac Pro, I'm getting hardly any usage at all out of the virtual cores, whereas I am getting a little more usage out of the virtual cores on the MacBook Pro. But you'll notice most of the colors are red here. Red means it's system, OS, kernel usage. This is basically disk I/O, and that really is the limiting factor. So it's the throughput of your feeding your card to the computer. So if you have a really slow SD card, it's going to take considerably longer because Lightroom really can't do much else. It's really not doing anything but copying them over and then pulling the embedded preview off and throwing it. And that's, really small. So that gives you an idea on why the tests are really consistent between almost every one of these computers tests. There's not much difference in importing from a card. On test 2, we make a one-to-one preview of all 500 files. And as you can see, this is where the Mac Pro starts to shine. It did it in 5 minutes and 2 seconds, half the time of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is by far the fastest of any of the Macs I've tested, including the 2013 Mac Pro. And the reason's pretty clear. Let's just take a look at the test there. So here's the test as we start. Now these tests have been normalized, so you'll see that they take 2 minutes to play in a video. So you'll see that The Mac Pro is actually way ahead of the MacBook Pro. That's why the green bars aren't going as far. Here I'm already at 354. If I scroll to the end of the test, you'll see. But the reason this test is so much better on the Mac Pro is real simple. You're getting almost 100% of core utilization in this test. The more, green is good. And basically in this particular test, you are utilizing the processor almost to its max. If you notice real quick, we can take a look at the speeds. So this blue line here is the average of all the cores that it's running on the processor. The top line is actually how fast the fastest core is running. And this blue area is kind of shows the spread of the different core speeds. So each of the cores can run at a different clock speed. But what's happening is you're maintaining well above the 3.3 gigahertz. The solid straight line is the actual rated clock speed of the processor. You're operating at an average of 3.55 gigahertz versus 2.89 gigahertz. So not only whenever we're maxing the cores out, the Mac Pro will have an advantage because it can maintain a 3.3 or better gigahertz clock speed, whereas the MacBook Pro, if you max the cores out, 2.9 to 3.0 is about the best it's going to do. So on test 3, we export all of those A7R files with absolutely no modifications in the develop module. So basically they're straight export. We set it to be JPEG 60 and resize to 4,000 pixels on the long side. And here again, you can see the Mac Pro does it in less than half the time, 4 minutes and 48 seconds versus 10 minutes and 22 seconds on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. And again, we can see the reason why. Here's just a screenshot. Both of them are totally maxing out the cores. And you can see right here that the MacBook Pro is running at about 2.8 to 3.0 gigahertz, and the Mac Pro is running between 3.3 or 3.5 and 4 gigahertz. And with this kind of core utilization, it definitely has an advantage. So this task is another one that is really core dependent. And if you are doing a lot of importing, exporting of files, you're going to cut your time in half in exporting. Moving on test 4, we exported the same files, except this time we made some modifications in the develop module. There were a few global changes. I did 10 dust spots. I did 2 graduated filters. Then I synced that to all of the other files to make sure that each computer is the same. I use an XMP sidecar file to set the first file of the import and then copy that so every file ends up with the exact same changes on all the tests that I do. It's surprising how much more time it takes to export them once you've done develop. And I'm assuming the more you work on an image, the longer it's going to actually take. Again, we were set to JPEG 60 and 4,000 pixels on the long side. And again, the Mac Pro was well over less than half the time, 12 minutes and 25 seconds versus 27 minutes and 43 seconds. So just a substantial difference. And again, the reason why, basically the same thing. We're able to use almost 100% of the CPUs and all the cores, and we're able to operate at a faster clock speed. And basically these 3 tasks are all very CPU dependent, and they're dependent on CPU cores. These tasks thread very well and can utilize high core counts. I would assume the more the cores, the faster it's going to get. Test 5 is to batch create 5 panoramas. Their files are all from a Phase 1 IQ 180 camera, so they're 80 megapixel files. There were various numbers of shots in each panel, ranging from 6 to 12. I basically just selected them all and then used the batch process in Lightroom to create the panels. And here we see that suddenly the Mac Pro and the MacBook Pro are almost identical. And still beat 2019 MacBook Pro. But here the reasons are a little different. Let's go take a look at the actual video of this. So here we're running into the test, and this time I really didn't normalize it because they were so close. But as you can see, the difference is pretty stark. Core utilization is really poor. Core efficiency, CPU efficiency is probably less than 40 to 50%. This particular task is more dependent on clock speed because the bulk of the work is being done by just a handful of cores. And as you can see, the core speed of the Mac Pro is averaging about 3.77. And if you'll notice, the core speed of the MacBook Pro is averaging about 3.77. So the MacBook Pro can run at the same clock speed. Basically, its 8 cores can run just as efficiently as the 12 cores in the Mac Pro. So this is one test, and I believe the reason, I'll be honest, there's only two things I can think of. Either they're using code they've got from Photoshop, which is legacy code, and most of Photoshop does not actually take advantage of cores very well, as we'll see in the next test, or this is just something that can't be threaded very well. Now that would surprise me, but I'll give them, I'm not an engineer or software developer. I don't know why you couldn't thread it better than this. For the last test, I run Puget Systems 2019 Photoshop benchmark test. This test basically runs 3 cycles of 21 different Photoshop actions and some pretty stressful ones. Takes a long time to run. And as you can see, almost identical for all 3 computers. And again, if we go look at the reason why, it's basically the same thing. As I scroll through this test, you'll see that there are times where it's able to use a lot of cores, but most of the time it's not utilizing cores very well. I mean, obviously the more green, the better. And again, you can see that the MacBook Pro is maintaining similar clock speeds as the Mac Pro. Even though it's only rated at 2.3 gigahertz, it is able to overclock. So when we get a situation like this where we're not threading very well and we're not really utilizing the core count. Now you see that there are some things right in here, you can see that Photoshop was pretty good at using a lot of cores, and then we get over here and now all of a sudden we're using 1 core. Obviously some of the tasks are limited by the system. All of this red here is system level stuff. It just appears that Photoshop just doesn't do a very good job, especially in some tasks of using a lot of cores. Well, that's a wrap on this video. I'm pretty happy with my Mac Pro so far. One thing that's really cool is that the processor is going to be upgraded, or is upgradable. I've actually seen a couple that have done it online. Linus did it, although I think he did it the wrong way. Another one I saw, it was actually really easy. He just took a couple screws out and pulled the heatsink right off and then popped a new CPU in there. And that means that the 28 core CPU, which is like $4, $5, $6 grand right now, maybe even more, in a couple of years, that'll probably be $1,000 and it'll be pretty easy to crank the thing up. And a lot of the things, this core count matters, and I think even Adobe realizes that it's time to quit worrying about gigahertz and do better at threading their processes. I know a lot of their problem is that this is a legacy stuff and it requires a complete rewrite to really take advantage of that. And unfortunately, they're too busy playing around with the Creative Cloud and trying to get people to put their pictures online. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video. It gives you some ideas on the Mac Pro. I know it's a little out of most people's price range. I hope Apple is smart enough to realize that there's still a middle ground there. There are people like me that don't need to put a lot of cards in, if any cards in. What we really need is a really good CPU and the ability to put our own monitors on it. So personally, I would wish they would revive the Mac Pro or enhance the Mac Mini or come out with a Mac Pro Mini or something which doesn't have a display. I can still get 12 or 15 or 18 cores in it. They really need a machine like that. There's a lot of photographers and other people that just want a really good computer. They want to use Mac OS. They like Mac OS, but they don't want to buy an iMac because they want to use an ISO or a BenQ or something like that. Encourage you to subscribe to the channel down there. I've got a lot of videos coming out. I'm going to try to get to where I'm doing about 1 a week. I've got a whole series on color management that I'm in the middle of making. I think it'll help a lot of people understand some of the myths and misconceptions about color management. And so make sure you hit the notification bell. And until next time, see ya.